So what's the key issue you're addressing at your talk earlier today about robots?
Was the effect of robots on the types of work that people do by combining robots with artificial intelligence. This robotic revolution affects literally every job and the incomes people will make from their jobs in the economy.
What are the three key takeaways from your talk?
Okay. Well, the first is that the robots are increasingly becoming substitutes for people. So it's not a machine like a tractor. This is like a tractor that can make decisions that the farmer would normally make. So they're more and more like people in their production, what they do for the production. Two is because every year the robots get better and better, because that's what technology is. We're making them more and more efficient, and their costs of what they do basically goes down. We have an issue of what happens to our wages, because if I can do something and the robot can do something and the robot can do it cheaper than I can currently do, I'd either better find either another job or my wage is going to be lowered. And the evidence is that where there is more robots, the wages of workers in the United States at least are lower, and there are fewer workers working. So robots really are substituting for people. And my third takeaway or point is that who owns the robots rules the world, which is that if the robot technologies are controlled by a small number of rich people, they are going to be more powerful in our social lives. And if we have a broader ownership of this technology, then the robots can help people get more leisure and raise their incomes rather than reduce their incomes.
Given what we have seen in the past 1 or 2 decades in terms of inequality around the world, are you optimistic or pessimistic about this ownership issue?
Oh, I'm probably unrealistically optimistic in the sense of the trend of inequality has gotten bigger and bigger in every country. In the U.S., in Europe now, in China, the rich get richer and the normal people, maybe they get a little bit better, maybe they stagnate, but they're falling further behind the rich. So you don't see any evidence that this trend breaking. The robotization is going to add to this trend. And why would I be optimistic? Because I think we have the capabilities of changing the ownership of this knowledge asset and make it more public so that workers will have shares in their companies, profit sharing. And the people I talk to, they don't have very good alternatives to that. You have a universal basic income, that's also possible, but that could be viewed as giving people a certain ownership stake on the whole GDP of the country. And I'm more favorable to having people have an ownership stake in their own companies where they are working. And you probably could combine the two of them. And a lot of people, including many wealthy people and business people, who normally would regard this kind of changes as, it's against their interests because it means they're not going to be as rich as they otherwise could be. They are now taking seriously that the inequality cannot keep growing the way it has. And so I think there's more people who are looking for ways to cut into it, and ownership has a very great appeal to people on the right as well as the left.
Do you think, so then which would be the cause and which will be the results? I mean, can technology help us break this inequality? Or the other way around, that we need to tackle this issue of inequality first before we can all benefit from this technological dividend?
Oh, I think the quicker we address the who owns the technology, that will be the way we can address the inequality. And you cannot, it's dangerous to let the inequality keep going up. Then the rich will have extraordinary powers and influence on governments. And then we've seen already these populist uprisings, voters in some countries. And you will, it then gets towards social instability. So I would want to see us move before that, before we have serious problems, and people are getting more and more upset with the rich. And then when they see the robots coming along and pushing their wages down more, that's just not a good way to go.
That will be the real robot revolution, right? People rebel because the robots help their suppressors to further suppress us.
Well, I would say the robots are only doing what their owners have them do. And if I own my robot, it helps me do my work, and I get the profits that is created from my work. If you own the robot, it gets the profits, and I am now becoming less and less important in the production process because the robot gets smarter and better and more effective over time. So it is really critical as to who owns this technology. If I get educated, I own the education, and therefore the incomes from my education, my knowing more and being able to do more, goes to me. If you owned my education, then I would just be paid a low wage, and the returns to my education would go to you. And the robots are the same kind of thing. It's if I own it, my robot, I have the technology, it goes to me, I benefit. If you own it, the benefits go to you. And so to me, it's very simple. We just have to make sure that people are owners in some way or another of this potentially great technology that will let us do less work and produce more.
So I suppose this ownership would have to take so to realize this ownership, the pathway then will be very different in many different countries. So it has everything related to the existing economic, political structures and so on. So can you say, for example, China or the States, whichever one you're more familiar with, how would you envision such a change can happen? Just use one of the countries.
Well, the States I know well, and I think the States is more because it's economically more advanced. It becomes easier.
No, but you said China is the biggest.
Yes, China's the biggest. It is the biggest user of robots in the world, and supposedly will increase its use of 39% of the robots in the world will be sold will be in China in, I think, 5 years from now or something. But the States, we have a history of, which is our revolution, which is different than the Chinese revolution, in which the leaders of the country and the founders of the country believed that people had to own land, which was then the capital. So today, it's not so hard for the Americans to make this jump of, okay, once we needed land so everybody could participate equally in the society, and now it has to be basically business and knowledge capital that we all should have some stake in. We have already 10% of the American workers are in companies that are owned in part by workers. Many American firms pay people by profit sharing, and many companies have stock options and things that go not just to the top executives, but to a lot of people inside the company. So we have a tradition that I think it makes it easier for us to move to this a type of ownership. And the Americans, and here I don't know what the Chinese attitudes are, so you have to tell me. Every American worker would like to be an owner. So it's in our culture that we should be owners. If you compare it to the Europeans, and I suppose this is, it's in Europe, there's a class division much stronger. Some of the working class, and then there's the capitalists. It's true, there is their own, but the Americans all want to be owners. We want to be capitalists in that sense. The Europeans, a lot of people don't make that jump. I don't know what the attitude of average Chinese worker would be. Do they want to be a participant and an owner in their company, or do they just want to be a worker and don't bother me with company activities? Certainly young people and young educated people tend to want some stake, some share of a company. But the average Chinese, I don't know. And then you start thinking of the rural migrants. It's hard to imagine them owning parts of their company if they work for this company one year, they work for another company another year. So I view this as at least a solution for the advanced part of the economy, not so much for the rural part.